Baseball on Masson is brought to you by Southwest. Yes to low fares with nothing to hide. That's transparency. Well, here at Oriole Park at Camden Yards, a rain delay to begin. Our BGE Home game time temperature brought to you by BGE Home, Baltimore's home team for heating, cooling, plumbing, and electrical. Why would you call anyone else? Well, 76 degrees, just a slight breeze, and that humidity is way up there, and you can feel it 90%. Overcast skies here at Camden Yards. And for the Indians, they come in at first place in the AL Central. Lindor, Kipnis, and Jose Ramirez, who was on a tear, and the American League Player of the Week last week. How about a .516 batting average the past week? Encarnacion, Chisenhall, and Santana, with Gomes, the rookie Zimmer, and the veteran Austin Jackson.
So Dylan Bundy in search of his 8th win, staff ace. You know, again, a lot of guys haven't pitched as well as they are capable, but he's won 7 games trying to win 8. Same old in the sense that, again, he's been really good. He's been constant. He can pitch deep into ball games, you know, low runner in scoring position numbers. You can see the fact that, you know, he gets lefties and righties out. He's a fly ball pitcher, and I didn't play well over the weekend. When in the Cards games, there were 22 home runs hit between both teams. In fact, the Cardinals hit 22 and only won one of the 3 games. So Dylan, you know, coming off a game where the Orioles did not play very well for him in defensively early in the game. He gave up a home run to Matt Davidson, but he ends up giving up 5 runs and 4 hits. I don't think you want to do that tonight against Corey Kluber, and he knows that. So he'll try to be a little sharper, and hopefully the Orioles will play better behind him.
Well, there's no doubt Dylan has been the Orioles' most consistent starter. He's made 14 starts, and he has 11 quality starts. So he certainly has found that consistency that all starting pitchers strive for, and he'll go to work on Francisco Lindor, whose bat has cooled off a little bit. He's at 256. Comes in at a 183 clip in his last 18 games. One of 3 switch hitters in this lineup, and there's a strike to get underway. Of course, the Indians, defending American League champions, they took the Cubs to extra innings in Game 7 of the World Series and came up a little short. And he popped them up. Jonathan Scope moving out at the shallow right field. And he's got it. So a 2-pitch out, 1 down.
Take a look at the defense, and you know, it's a little different because of injuries, but Kim, Jones, and Smith. Adam Jones in center has won 4 Gold Gloves. Smith had a big day with a bat. Machado, Tejada with Hardy going on the DL because of the non-displaced fracture of the right hand, wrist. Scope, Mancini, and then Wellington Castillo. So Ruben Tejada, who, again, if you were with us yesterday, Paul Janisch gets called up, a terrific defensive shortstop. But Tejada's very good. Mike Matheny, who manages the Cards, said, boy, he can pick it. So, and again, you know, single hitter, doesn't hit a lot of home runs.
Ball 1 to Jason Kipnis. And there's a strike on the corner. Kipnis does not agree with Bill Miller.
Well, you'd like to against a team that's hitting very well and hitting a lot of home runs, which is the Indians, really, and I guess the Orioles. You want that extra maybe inch. We had very tight strike zones over the weekend. So if anything, they favored the hitters, and the hitting coaches and hitting instructors were very happy about that. There's Terry Francona, good changeup. Well, the Indians are going to find that. I mean, for Dylan Bundy, he's 24. You know, last year he was a fastball, curveball, changeup. This year he's a fastball, curveball, changeup, slider, and it's a good one. So 4 pitches, throw him in any count. And that's probably one of the better curveballs we've seen in a while. He hasn't really used his curveball as much as maybe earlier in the season.
What's interesting about the slider or cutter, when he was asked, well, what is it, a cutter or a slider? And he said, yes. So whatever it is, whatever you want to call it, it moves. And he gets a lot of swings and misses.
He had an 80 out of an 80 in high school.
Off the glove. And that's going to be an infield hit.
Yeah, it's a base. It would have been a routine out if he lets it go, and the minute he deflects it and doesn't catch it, you do get your infield hit, which is exactly what the Indians want, with a lot of hitters behind him. So take a look. I mean, you can see with the second baseman, he's just going to go over And again, the shift is on, so Ruben Tejada's just going to take it 2 steps to his right, catch the ball, and throw Kipnis out. And you have to really have some. I mean, it's a kind of a natural reflex to try to catch the ball, but when you know your infield defense, and as he gets more experience, they'll probably have a better idea of that. You don't deflect the balls that you know you can't catch, or you think you can catch, but you can't.
Jose Ramirez, another switch hitter.
And red hot.
He's got a 6-game hitting streak in which he's batting .593.
And it's not only that, Jim. I mean, how about 8 doubles and 3 home runs? So the slugging percentage and the total bases off the chart.
Bundy gets ahead 0-2.
Yeah, we saw in Chicago, and again, he struggled a little bit early. The defense wasn't particularly good. He gave up the 1 long ball. But the velocity as the game proceeded, he got up to 93 to 95. So like his average fastball, Roger McDowell, his pitching coach, along with Alan Mills looking on, and he's been able to kind of amp it up a little bit.
Breaking ball pulled foul, hung a little bit. Sandy Alomar. Ramirez at .313, 7th in the league in batting with that average. Now for Bundy, he's trying to continue the streak that was started by Wade Miley on Saturday. Miley won Saturday's game, and then Ubaldo won yesterday. So back-to-back wins by starters. As that pitch is taken high. The Orioles have put together 3 consecutive winning starts just twice this year. The last time was May 31st to June 2nd when Gausman, Miley, and then Alec Asher won consecutive games. And the other time it happened was way back May 6th through the 8th. This ball's hit the center field for Adam Jones. And 2 down. Well, Jim mentioned Cleveland comes in hot. They've won 5 in a row, and here's the turnaround in June.
Yeah, well, again, they start scoring more runs. I mean, obviously, most of the time, but when you're scoring 8 runs a game, you're going to win a lot of games. But look at the opponent runs. I mean, to me, that's the most important thing. You know, you ramp up your offense, but you also pitch well. And again, we talked about it in the opening. You got to go back 2 years before they lost more than three games in a row.
And here's their big addition, Edwin Encarnacion.
Dylan looks in because he thought that slider was a perfect strike. Well, he had a nice little day yesterday, wouldn't you say? 2 hits, or actually 3 hits, 2 of them home runs, sacrifice fly.
Well, he drove in all their runs, right?
Yeah, he did.
There's the slider.
He's having a Jonathan Scope month, you know, where he's hitting .370 with 6 home runs and 14 RBIs. 3-year deal with the Indians, I think, for about $20 million a year. And those are the last 10 games.
Let's get a look at our StatCast powered by AWS, and you see with Encarnacion up the shift. So Jonathan's on the shortstop side, Tejada deep in the hole and Manny deep, with Trey Mancini holding the bag on Kipnis at first.
Yeah, the first home run for Edwin yesterday was 454 feet into the upper deck in Minnesota. And then the second one was, I think, 412 at Cheapy.
And he pops it up. That's going to be back in the stands. Encarnacion with 16 home runs, 36 RBIs. And he's hit 6 of those home runs in his last 6 games. Got off to a slow start. Of course, when you change teams, new atmosphere. Got the $60 million contract, 20 a year times 3. He turned down $80 million to stay in Toronto. That ball's hit to left field. Kim is there, and Hansu will put it away. So Encarnacion gets under it, a base hit, a man left. We get to the bottom of the first. Here come the Birds. Come the bat in the bottom of the first. It is drying up. Rain most of the afternoon, but after a delay, baseball. And here's the Orioles lineup, brought to you by Southwest. Yes to low fares with nothing to hide. That's transparency. Smith, Machado, and Jones with Trumbo in the cleanup spot. Big time numbers last year against the Indians, including 3 home runs and 10 RBIs. Trey Mancini bats 5th. That's Scope, Castillo, Kim, and Ruben Tejada in place of J.J. Hardy, who officially goes to the DL.
Well, call AAA. That's one of the scouting reports because you're having a little road trouble. And I mean, he's 4-0 at home, 1.2, 1-2 on the with a 4.50 ERA. Great hook. I don't know if we saw Martinez on Friday night with a great slider and curveball, and then K-Master, about 11 strikeouts per 9 innings. He can strike you out. He can, he's probably going to throw 91 to 93. You will never, very much like Bundy, even though he's 31 and Dillon only 24, you're never going to know what he's thinking. So there's a high strike. And again, I think from Bill Miller, we've already seen a little of a wandering strike zone. And I think it's a big, if I recall, I think early on, I mean, he's more of a pitcher's umpire.
Well, Seth Smith yesterday got the O's going in the bottom of the first, as he got the O's on the board.
Yeah, we always talk about on-base percentage, but it's for a lot of hitters, and he talked about it in the post-game interview. I got to see about 7 pitches off of Lance Lynn, who came in really pitching well, and hit the 7th one over the center field fence. And here it is, and again, you're just trying to put a good swing on it, so. He sails it out of here. Orioles get off to a 1-0 lead. You can 3 leadoff home runs in 2017.
Crushes that one, but it's foul. Wow, did that go a long way? That may have hit the warehouse.
Well, he just threw a 92 and he kind of cut it in. I don't think it was a cutter. It's just inside. Watch how far inside. And I mean, again, he's just right to it. And boy, is that an information pitch? The Mercedes pitch count. Good movement, but right to the bat head. And now all of a sudden, again, he throws about 37% breaking balls when he does get to 2 strikes, but not that time.
It's Lindor in the shift, so the shortstop gets him 1 down.
Take a look at their defense, and you got Austin Jackson, former center fielder. You got the #1 draft choice and Bradley Zimmer in center. Chisenhall, former third baseman. Again, he's now in right. Ramirez, Lindor, Kipnis, Santana, former catcher, over first, and then Yan Gomes, healthy, at least for the moment, doing the catching.
Here's Manny in the #2 spot again. Now, Manny's bat is showing signs of coming around. He's got a 2-game hitting streak going, and he has an RBI now in 3 consecutive games. Batting average at .217 for Machado.
Yeah, he's got a little bit of a slower, kind of like a slurve. That was like a little cut fastball, gets you back into the count, and then he can, as we mentioned, and we saw it to Seth Smith, he can add a couple miles per hour. And there's the slider. It is a really good breaking ball.
Manny is 3 for 10 against Kluber head-to-head. Of course, you only see the Central teams for 2 series. And Kluber is going to wait and tag out Machado for the 2nd out.
And that's probably a good thing when it comes to Cleveland. They got a nice mixture of starters. With Carrasco, we'll see Tomlin tomorrow. Kluber. Trevor Bauer pitched very well for him, even though he's been a little inconsistent. There's the pitching coach, Mickey Callaway, who's done a terrific job here. And then, of course, they have a great bullpen.
Yeah, their bullpen is the best in the American League, ERA-wise.
Well, to give you an idea, I mean, if you want to compare, the Indians are at .393 team-wise. That's starters and wherever. The Orioles are over a run higher. 393 to 4.97, and that's tied for 14th or 15th, along with the Twins. And they did do a number on the Twins, swept them 4 straight.
Ball 1 to Adam Jones. Bouncer, base hit past Santana. So Adam goes with it. He's on with a 2-out single.
Yeah, and you can see, I mean, how shallow Chisenhall is. I mean, you're off the line. This is percentage baseball. Santana can't get it, and Chisenhall standing right there. This is a very small ballpark, and they play very shallow. And we'll see how that plays out, because you run out of room. Sound like Cleveland. You know, Cleveland has a little bit more room as far as pitching. You know, even though they pretty much pitch the same whether they're home. I mean, a little higher at home at 399. On the road, they're at 388, but they score more runs at home in Cleveland than they do on the road.
Well, Mark Trumbo up, and certainly a home run threat, and he reminds us every year that the home runs tend to come in bunches, and I think he's getting onto one of those streaks. He now has 10 home runs on the year. Didn't mean the swing, and the ball's fouled off, and here's Mark the last 2 games.
Well, you know, I mean, that's yesterday where he's just really trying to get the ball in the air, and he does. Lynn can't believe it sails out of here. Hit a curveball. In fact, Lynn had thrown his curveball and struck out 3 batters with it, and he got it, and it really wasn't up a whole lot, but the ball was flying, and hit a fastball over the center field fence the night before.
And he got him. There's the slider. So Trumbo down on strikes, and that will end the first. Base hit, a man left. Will end to the second. No score. Home starts going back to 1954, and Dylan Bundy is on the list as he is number 6, 1 spot ahead of Mr. James Palmer.
Well, there you go. I did not know that till I saw that. Of course, Tom Phoebus came up, pitched his first 2 starts were shutouts in the big leagues. Wally Bunker went 19-5, rookie pitcher of the year in 1964, then hurt his shoulder. He would come back and actually won one of the World Series games, 1-0, game 3 of 66 against the Dodgers.
Ball 1 to Lonnie Chisenhall. Santana and Gomes will follow. Chisenhall 4 for his last 13, but over his last 19 games he's been swinging the bat very well.
Well, he had a couple of home runs in one game over the weekend. He's already more home runs than he had all last season, and a nice year for him. You know, last couple of years, after a former #1 draft choice, he went from being a third baseman to the regular right fielder.
See Manny well wide of the bag at third. Not a full shift. Both these starters excel in their home starts. Bundy's 4-2, so 4 of his 7 wins right here, and his ERA at home is 2.38. Out in front of that one.
There's the
Loud
changeup.
foul.
Yep. Yeah, I was asking Roger McDowell because if you look at the home ERA, I mean, you know, the home ERA for the Orioles is around 3.9, and on the road it's over 6 runs a game. And he said a lot of it is probably the fact that they're inexperienced and they're young. You know, it's different when you pitch on the road. I mean, it's not like the mound's any farther or any closer. Now the mound may feel a little bit different, but you know, you're away from your home fans. Orioles play great here at Camden Yards. And all of a sudden you go, I never really thought much about it. Obviously, you know that if you're in Boston, they're going to root for the Red Sox. Same in New York or Chicago or Kansas City. But he just felt that, you know, hopefully as they get more experience, and we're not talking about Chris Tillman, we're talking about Gosman, who had won 25 games without winning on the road, even though he pitched well enough to win some of those. You know, Miley a veteran, so it shouldn't make a whole lot of difference.
And the 3-2 is swung on and hit to right field. Smith back on it. That ball carries. Adam Jones calls him off, and Adam in front of the wall makes the catch.
Yeah, you're a little gun shy. It's like pitching in Fenway Park. Every time you hit a fly ball to the left, your heart starts fluttering. After watching this weekend, if you're Dylan Bundy, and of course he didn't pitch in the weekend series.
Tell you what,
yeah, we
yesterday
saw
that's a home run.
Well, yeah, and you know, I mean, there's a lot more humidity tonight than, you know, yesterday was around 90 degrees, but it was a beautiful day. A little bit of wind, no wind at all now. So maybe the park playing a little bit more normal, even though it's a really good hitter's park.
Carlos Santana, the veteran of this team, he'll take a strike. Came up as a catcher years ago when the Indians traded Victor Martinez to the Red Sox. Carlos Santana stepped in as the #1 catcher. Now he's their first baseman. Bundy coming off a win last Wednesday in Chicago, the one game the Orioles won against the White Sox.
Yeah, the one thing, if you do your homework and you look at the numbers for Carlos, and that's this year, but normally, I mean, last year he walked 99 times, struck out 99 times, but look at his eye. And I ran into him in the hallway and I said, you know, you really walk out. Why do you strike out so much? He said, well, I do run the deep counts. He said, but I look for a little circle. And if it's not there until I get the 2 strikes, I'm not going to swing. And of course, he's a switch hitter, power from both sides.
And he'll go ahead and take the walk.
Yeah, and there were a lot of, probably 3 pitches that a lot of less,
so Santana,
patient hitters would have swung it.
Well, fans, on Wednesday when the O's battled the Indians right here at Oriole Park, all fans received the Dylan Bundy t-shirt. So show your Birdland pride and come on out and paint the ballpark orange. Good seats remain, and they're available for as low as $15. For tickets, Orioles.com or 888-848-BIRD. Number 37, Dylan Bundy. Those are good-looking t-shirts. We've already seen the Trey Mancini one, and now the Bundy shirt. There's ball 1 to Yan Gomes, the #1 catcher for the Indians. Gomes 2 for 9 on the Indians road trip. Swings through an off-speed pitch, and 1-1 the count.
Yeah, again, just slowing the bat down with a good changeup, and I mean, this is what he does. He'll use all his pitches anytime. And right there, right to the glove, didn't get the call. I mean, that's how he got Encarnacion Nation out, able to get the ball in early enough.
Bundy has said, you know, strikeouts are nice, but it's not really what he's all about. He'd rather a hitter put the ball in play and get him out in as few pitches as possible. Right back to Bundy. He'll go to Scope and back to first for a double play. So that one he was able to glove, and he turns a 1-4-3 double play to end the inning. So the 1-out walk, but none left as Bundy stabbed at that ball. He got it, and Scope did the rest. game, Valerie Broadley of Northwood has won $500 for being selected and will win $500 more for every home run hit in the game tonight by the O's. Play home run richest scratch-offs and win up to $50,000, or enter your non-winning tickets for a chance to be the contestant of the game. Visit mdlottery.com/home run. So good luck to Valerie Broadley. Mike Wright will be heading to Sarasota to begin his rehab. He's on the DL with a sore shoulder. I guess they classified it as tendonitis. And there's our booth mate, Zach Britton, who said he was very nervous being on television. Something about the lights and the heat. And standing next to Mr. Palmer.
Yeah, closing games are easy.
Mancini, shallow center field. Who's it going to be? It's going to be the second baseman going back to get it. Kipnis. Nicely done. That ball right off the end of the bat, and Bradley Zimmer, the rookie, I think did not read that off the bat. Yeah, was very slow in coming in.
Yeah, high slider, and he might have taken a step back, and then he doesn't want to trample. He's a big guy, you know, former #1 draft choice 2014. So just in case you drop it, I'll be there to cradle the ball, or you. Kipnis doesn't get run over. A very athletic young player. Bradley Zimmer playing center field for him.
Strike one to Jonathan Scope. Jonathan at 289. He's having a real solid, consistent season. In his last 8 games, batting at a .345 clip. He is 10 for his last 29, couple of home runs. And he has 8 RBIs in those 8 games, and he leads the Orioles in RBIs with 41. Right to the third baseman, Ramirez, down on a knee to glove, and throws out Scope, and 2 quick outs. Well, fans, over the weekend the Orioles wore the special Father's Day uniforms. You can visit Orioles.com/auctions and bid on the autographed and authenticated game-worn jerseys and caps. Now, all the proceeds will benefit the Orioles Charitable Foundation. Bidding closes Saturday at 10 p.m., so visit Orioles.com/auctions today. Youngster at the game, enjoying his peanuts.
A sea of orange.
That's a good-looking shirt with a cartoon bird. Castillo takes a strike. There's a bouncer to Lindor at short. He'll get Castillo, and Corby Kluber has a 3-up, 3-down inning, 6 pitches to retire the side in order. We'll head to the third, no score. Orioles baseball on MASN is brought to you by PNC Bank, for the achiever in you. Well, the flowers certainly enjoyed today, getting a lot of water.
They're happy.
Absolutely.
Happy little flowers.
That's what we like, Jim. We like happy flowers. Bundy is allowed an infield hit off his glove and a walk, but the walk was erased on a double play. The Orioles starters as a group, Corey Kluber talking with Yan Gomes. As he walked off the mound, he stopped and had about a 30 to 40 second conversation with the home plate umpire, Bill Miller. So either Kluber thought he was squeezed on a few, or...
Oh, I don't know about that. So here's their... Well, I guess you'd almost call him a phenom. #1 draft choice in 2014, and because of injuries had a chance to come up here and getting to play.
Made his big league debut on May 16th against Tampa Bay, and then the following day not only picked up his first big league hit, his first major league home run. And he's a big guy, 6'5", 220. He went to the University of San Francisco in his native San Francisco.
Well, you talk about somebody with athleticism. When you're looking at #1 draft choices, this is what you kind of look, and then you hope they're able to work their way through the minor leagues and make adjustments. Yeah, you're right. I mean, that first game down in Tampa, he struck out 3 times, and then I think 3 out of 4 times. The next night, yeah, double off the wall early in the game, and then a home run down the right field line. Parents had come all the way from San Francisco.
Bundy falls behind 3-0. And a strike on the corner.
A low strike. Been a ball yesterday or Saturday or Friday. Very tight strike zones for pitchers.
Bounce it back, so Bundy back in the count at 3-2. The Indians 36-31. Bundy, for a 6th time now, is facing a Central Division opponent. He's 2-2 against the Central, both wins against the White Sox. And he got him. So he fell behind 3-0, and he comes back to get the strikeout. 1 away.
Yeah, Bradley Zimmer's going to throw the bat away and go to first. This ball's right down the chute, right at the knees, and he poured it in there at 93. He's got such a good windup for a kid. Of course, that's never been a problem. And the first time I saw him throw in Sarasota, his first spring, he's Nolan Ryan, Dennis Martinez, just easy. That's why he's able to throw to you want to, ideally you want to have a windup that you can repeat. He does. Want to be able to have that lane to the inside corner, to the outside corner, and your front side allows you to do that. That's your steering wheel. And at that time, of course, he was fully healthy, and then he would have the Tommy John and then the shoulder problems.
Austin Jackson had trouble this past offseason finding a job, and he finally signed a minor league contract with the Indians. He went to their major league camp as a non-roster invitee. And the outfield depth certainly has paid off for him, and the ability to play all 3 outfield positions.
Yeah, center fielder, as we mentioned, playing left, and I ran into the hallway today. He had a turf toe injury, hit the front of the bag, so a little bit on the DL early on.
So you were hallway hanging today, huh?
No, just walking down the hallway. When you come in, you have to go through kind of the security, and the batting cage is over there. And
yeah, past the
Buck
Orioles.
Showalter didn't like the players, kind of, the visiting players coming across the field, so they have to come down that hallway.
A little bit low, ball 3.
When you're on the road, you can go out on the field. You can actually talk to the home team. But here, I mean, unless you're down on field late, the only way you ever get to talk to them is either in the locker room or, in fact, if you go down and stay on the field when you're really up here doing your work.
That'll slice back out of play, so the count holds 3-2 on Jackson.
Yeah, and this is what the Indians want. Even if you're not Wild, they want Bundy to throw a lot of pitches. Because of your bullpen injuries, we talked about this all weekend. Terry Francona talking on the left, talking to Brad Mills, his bench coach, and they don't like each other, so they move away from each other. But no, so they want the pitch. Okay, now I like you. I'm going to come over.
And right at Machado. And 2 quick outs here in the 3rd inning. Let's get a look at our PNC minor league report. PNC for the achiever in you.
So a right-handed pitcher, boy, is he having a nice year. And again, I mean, he could do a lot of things. And I was looking at the fact that his first couple of years, maybe more hits than innings pitched as a starter. And I got the scouting report that you got for him, curve, slider, and changeup. So as he's gotten more experience, he's probably the repertoire is expanded.
Well, when I saw ground ball pitcher who throws strikes, I knew he was your kind of guy.
At people.
Lucas Long.
At people.
Yep. Ground balls at fielders. Lindor down on the count quickly 0-2.
Yeah, you mentioned the fact that he, Francisco really got off to. I mean, had a great year last year. He had over 300 to 301. He had 15 home runs. Drove in 78 runs, switch hitter, very good defensive shortstop, stole 19 base. He can do a lot of things for a young player out of Puerto Rico. Great postseason. And then you start in April, you hit 309, you hit 7 home runs, almost half what you hit last year, and you probably think you can hit everything. And everybody that I've talked to said just, overly aggressive. And little Manny Machado doesn't have that Manny's capability for power, but he's a good hitter.
And it helps that he's a switch hitter, so popped up to scope his first at bat.
Yeah, Dillon tried to get in, didn't quite get it to the inside corner. So Under able to foul it off. Yeah, I think if you're pitching against Corey Kluber and you're kind of looking at what's going on, you want to stay out there long. You don't want to give up any runs.
This is sliced to left. Kim was deep, but Hung-Soo gets in on it, and Bundy has his first 3-3 down inning. Mid-third at Camden Yards, no score. Birds stopped by New Song Academy over at Pauline Fauntleroy Park in Baltimore, all part of the Have a Catch campaign. The Orioles have launched the campaign. It's a new program designed to encourage children and fans of all ages to go outside and enjoy a game of catch. The Orioles donated baseballs and youth bat and balls, and here's Michael on the day.
It was really fun. It was being a kid again, going with them to teach them how to catch and the routine, and it's the most fun I had in a while, so it's been really good being around those kids. They're really respectful, great manners, and you don't see that a lot. And being around those kids brings a little kid in you, and going through being around older adults and with the respect they did, and they had a good time.
And the little kid, Michael Givens, he got to play catch with some of the youngsters, and that was a thrill, of course, for them, a major leaguer showing up and showing that he cares.
Well, the Orioles do a great job of that. They've always fostered that, and just think, they got the bonus. He pitches now, but he's an infielder. He can teach him a lot of tricks. Oh, good changeup. You don't see a whole lot from Kluber with that. Because the other stuff is so good, but him a much better fastball hitter. What's he do? Pulls the string. Very efficient so far tonight. Yeah. There's the cutter. Not a lot of good pitches to hit, and that's what good pitchers do. 18 wins last year. The year before, they didn't score any runs for him after winning it. The year before, he won it 18 games and won the Cy Young. Last year, what, second?
Well, he's averaging 11 Ks per 9 innings, and he recently picked up his 1,000th career strikeout. It was Yasiel Puig in the 5th inning in a start against the Dodgers. That was last Wednesday. Strikeout number 1,000. And a check swing to Tejada. Ruben Tejada is going to get a lot of playing time. Here's J.J. Hardy yesterday.
Yeah, again, just a fastball that runs up and in, and it hits him right on the right wrist. And really under the left wrist, right about, under the left wrist, and then hits the right wrist.
Well, Tejada to center field. That chases Zimmer back. And on the warning track, he has the out, 2 men down. Well, the Orioles, some key players on the disabled list.
Yeah, so the bullpen shortened with Britton and Dara, and both of them have been on the DL and off the DL twice. Chris Davis with the oblique, and that's again, I mean, that's probably what, a 2 week to 2 week. It's not a day to day. So he's on the DL, and then JJ's out. He said today 4 to 6 weeks, and then he'll do the rehab. Zach seems to be probably closer than anybody. So hopefully he'll be back in 2 weeks.
He will be in Ironbird tomorrow. Here's Seth Smith. And Kluber, a strike machine, gets ahead of him.
Well, when you're good, then you're supposed to be able to command the ball. They give it to you. Throw strikes, change speeds, pitch quickly. That was the old T-shirt that Ray Miller, when he was the pitching coach after George Bamberger, used to give us. And the guys that follow that had a lot of success. Now, I don't think Kluber has that T-shirt, but he certainly knows what to do.
Here you see the shift against Smith, who steps out of the box after every pitch and adjusts his batting gloves. I guess that's a little bit of a habit he developed over the years.
Nice hands, feet.
3 home runs, 5 ribbies in the month of June.
Well, you talk about the 11 strikeouts, and you know they have some pretty good notes here. I mean, he's in the top 4 since 2014 in strikeouts. Sale, Scherzer, and Kershaw. That's a select group of pitchers. He hangs in there right there, trying to go up the ladder and strike them out. Yeah, you look at the numbers, and this is, we're into that 247 the first time, 319. So the second time he has a little bit of trouble. And then it goes down dramatically to 145, even lower, 130 points lower the third time through the order. So to do that, you got to have 3 or 4 pitches and be able to use them all. Yeah, and then he went again.
He went too far, so that's strike 3. And 3 up, 3 down. The Orioles go for a 2nd consecutive inning. Kluber's retired 7 consecutive batters. fourth inning of Orioles baseball is brought to you by the all-wheel drive RAV4. Toyota, what drives you? Visit buyatoyota.com for great deals. The weather improving considerably.
It was a very bleak forecast. It's like a painting. Jim Hunter, impressionist. Sketched that.
Nah,
no,
not much with the art.
Well, you can do it on your, it's one of those iPad, not iPad, but tablet commercials. Yeah, I'm right there with you. Ever since my third grade teacher said, stop drawing and take up sports, I've had a little bit. But, yeah.
See,
she was direct.
It was good advice.
Well, I don't think that's what you're supposed to tell third graders, but she did. It worked out all right. Yeah, I mean, well, the good news, it worked out. The bad news, I had a bad self-image for many, many, many years.
Fly ball to right field, back on it is Smith, and he's got to play. Puts it away for the out. And one away here in the Cleveland fourth. Fans, don't forget you can lock in your Birdland summer. Reserve your seats for upcoming promotions, including the Zach Britton bobblehead and infielders bottle stopper set, the 25th anniversary Oriole Park replica ballpark, and more. For tickets, Orioles.com/tickets or 888-848-BIRD. There's Mr. Britton talking it over with his Sarasota neighbor, Chris Tillman. Ramirez slices it foul. It's going to be back in the crowd, out of play.
Well, this kid turned into a pretty good player. You know, utility guy till last year, hit over 300, drove in 76 runs, stole 22 bases, only got caught 7 times. Solid off, postseason when they go all the way to Game 7 of the World Series.
Perfect pitch.
Yep. No, that's that inside lane. Yeah, you always thought, we were taught that, plate 17 wide, the edge of the ball, so you can get that plate to about 22 inches, and there's about 5 inches on the inside part of the plate. There's a good curveball. The curveball much tighter. That's what Kipnis hit the right field tonight for Dylan Bundy. And then there's that lane outside. And you try to stay in those lanes and see how the hitter reacts. You watch film, know where their strength is. Are they high ball hitters, low ball hitters? With Ramirez, of course, you have to both sides of the plate.
There's a base hit. He got a pitch up in the zone and all over it. So Ramirez, red hot, stays hot. Throw to second base, just too late. So there's a double with 1 down.
Well, again, the hitters that are good, they have good swings, and there's 22 doubles now, 7 now in the last 7 games, and all he does, and Dylan tries to get the ball in on his fist. Watch him react. So again, he's covering outside corner, but it's a hittable pitch. Didn't get in as much as Dylan would like, and because of that, with a quick bat, hits it all the way to the wall, and with his speed, easily gets in with his 22nd double in a 0-0 game.
So he's now hitting 7 straight, and here's Edwin Encarnacion.
I mean, Encarnacion only hitting 169 with runners in scoring position, but he drives himself in 16 times. And Dylan Bundy was able to get in on his fist to get that lazy fly ball to left. But again, in this park, if you don't get in there, that's a home run.
A 1-0 on Encarnacion, who flied out his first at bat. Now, Bundy's done a real good job in these situations. Opposing hitters with runners in scoring position, just 186 against them.
With the league average in the 250s, that's exceptionally low.
Well, ducks on the pond, runners on base. The Orioles at home, 327 batting average. The Indians on the road, 212. So they have struggled on the road with runners in scoring position.
Well, that's why they're almost 5 runs a game at home and 4.46 on the road.
Hard hit ball past Machado. That's a base hit. And the Indians will get the lead. Ramirez around third will score, and Encarnacion heads to second with an RBI double.
Yeah, back-to-back doubles on pitches that end up in the middle of the plate. And It's one of the consequences if you're pitching when you don't make good pitches. And again, these are the two hottest guys. Not that other guys aren't swinging the bat well, but nobody better than Ramirez. And you can see that ball just a hanging hook, and he hits it hard enough that Manny Machado can't catch it. So fastball up to Ramirez for a double, and then a hanger. Well, maybe a little slider Encarnacion, and the Indians get their first run. And you don't like the fact that they traded places. So you have another runner in scoring position. Chisenhall, a much better hitter at 282 in these situations, at least to this point in the season.
Chisenhall flied out to Adam Jones his first at bat. Foul tip, a little late on the swing.
You know, that's perfect fastball, up and in, right on the corner.
Well, it's a milestone hit for Encarnacion, his 1500th hit, and it drives in a run.
So that is now 6 RBIs in the last 2 games. So, well, they got him because he's doing exactly what they got him for. That's what he did with Toronto. You know, I was kind of looking, you know, he's got 16 home runs in 2014. In the month of May, he hit 16 home runs. And only hit 34 on the year. So you get an idea that he can be streaky, as he was this year. So Dillon now, again, you like this count because you can pitch out of the zone, hopefully. And of course, Chisenhall, he's just trying to hit it somewhere. Put it in play and take your chances.
Well, again, Bundy plagued by all these foul balls. It elevates the pitch count. He doesn't chase. So the count to 1-2 on Chisenhall.
And a pretty balanced attack. You know, I always thought he was a guy that sprayed it around. He's got 8 hits to left, 10 up the middle, 16 to right. And as we mentioned, already 2 more home runs than he hit all last season.
One-two is ripped to the gap in right center field. That's going to be a base hit. Encarnacion will easily score, and Chisenhall heads to second base. 3rd consecutive double, 2 in a row driving runs. So a 1-2 pitch, and Chisenhall got a lot of it.
Well, you get an idea why this is a pretty good offensive club, because all of these 3 doubles have all been balls that were hittable. This is a changeup, not bad, but it stays up enough, and it moves, but it stays up, and he goes out and gets it. Well, this is a pretty, as we mentioned, they won 5 in a row. They're swinging the bat well.
Roger McDowell out for a chat.
Kind of a good news, bad news. The good news, with 22 home runs hit over the weekend, he's keeping the ball in the ballpark, but they're all extra base hits.
So Chisenhall picks up his 36th RBI. So Bundy trying to minimize the damage here. Kluber is obviously on his game tonight. He's retired 7 in a row and 9 of the 10 batters he's faced.
And then you have to understand, we showed that graphic in the opening, after struggling, they were 4-7, and now they're 5-0, and they've averaged 8 runs a game. Now you don't do that not swinging the bat well.
There's Santana, ball 1 inside.
And then you would kind of hope that now your next hitter, he would maybe be overly aggressive, but that's not Carlos Santana. Already walked. He's a home run guy. He had 34 home runs last year, and he walked 99 times. And he knows what he wants to hit.
Might not be a bad idea to put him on, set up a double play chance to end the inning.
Well, the problem is, and you know, Gomes certainly is a double play candidate, but if you make one mistake, all of a sudden you have big inning, and then against Kluber, that's exactly what the Indians want.
2-0 on Santana. And it's over, but low, ball 3.
Yeah, I mean, it's close, but just like the first at bat, he is not a little circle. It's not there. He's not swinging.
Trumbo and Zach on the bench. And there's a strike on the corner, borderline pitch, and Bundy got the call. Santana thought it was ball 4.
And it probably was.
Nice presentation there by Wellington.
Well, it was an interesting comment. He said, I didn't realize when I started playing 7 years ago, talking about Carlos Santana, how important it was to walk because of the run scored. It's a change up that it's up in the zone, but he fouls off. And over the years, whether it's when I played or what we've seen the Yankees back when they had that tremendous run in the 90s, or all the great offensive teams, the Red Sox in the 2000s, if you'll walk for the guy behind you and you have a good offensive team, you're going to score a bunch of runs. Subjugate your ego, take the walk. If they give it to you, let the other guy drive you in.
Just inside for ball 4. So the second walk allowed by Bundy, and each time it's been Santana. So that does set up the chance for a double play. If Gomes cooperates, it's a ground ball. Gomes did bounce into a double play his first at bat.
Now Dillon got behind him and threw him a great changeup, and he was able to catch it and turn the double play.
Ball 1 inside.
And I tell you, the fastball command's a little iffy, and that's how you get behind.
Well, Bundy got off to a tremendous start this year. In his first 7 starts, he went 5-1, and his ERA was 2.17 combined in those 7 starts. His last 7 starts, however, he's just 2-4, and his ERA is 4.5. And he hit him. So Gomes will trot to first, and the bases are loaded with only 1 down.
Well, I think, Ian, we just showed you a picture of Buck Showalter, the Orioles skipper, and I think the one thing they've always worried about, because all the arm injuries, most he's really pitched was last year with 109 innings, and he came in with 87. I think this is a combination. Maybe there's some fatigue, and maybe the fact you have to pitch well, and the fact that you're facing a really good hitting team. And you bunch those all together and you get yourself in trouble.
Sky improving.
And then because you can strike out Bradley Zimmer because that's what he did the first time, but he runs well. And those are pretty good numbers in limited at bats in the rookie season.
And he has not yet bounced into a double play.
Yeah, well, he runs.
Ball 1 outside. So 2 walks and now a hit batter, and 2 runs on 4 hits. One and 1.
Yeah, and there was if you're Bradley Zimmer, that was your pitch. Misses with a changeup, comes back with a fastball, middle of the plate, but again, he's got a very deceptive windup because it's so easy. He told me his dad said, Nuno getting loose, he said his dad said, you know what, you want to throw the ball hard and make it look like you're throwing easy with some extra late life. But now you're looking for a strikeout and you need it. You're already 2 runs down and with the bases loaded and only 1 out.
Zimmer, 24 years old. He's got a 2-game hitting streak going. Bundy ahead of him, 1 and 2. And he got him. Gets a fastball by him.
A young hitter, and of course he tried to change his speed, so you're hunting for a strikeout, but you got to get ahead. And there you go. It misses with a changeup. There's the hittable pitch, but he misses it. And then a good curveball, and then up the ladder. Didn't get it in, but with enough velocity, enough movement to strike him out.
So now he'll face Austin Jackson, who is the 8th hitter to bat here in the 4th inning.
Well, certainly. I mean, again, it sounds like, in Buck Showalter's terminology, a classic case of the obvious, but Jackson's 1 for 19 with runners in scoring position. Well, if he's able to get him out, or if he's able to get a hit, boy, what's that going to do for the Indians? And getting him out, what's that going to do for the Orioles? Keep him in the game. And crossed him up, it looked like. Yep. I don't think he was looking for that pitch, but he was somehow able to catch it.
See the pitch count already at 80 in the 4th inning. Long inning plus the foul balls.
Yeah, a little bit, 3 doubles. I mean, that started this inning. So then you become a little tentative. Control a little bit off. It certainly wasn't wild in innings 1, 2 to 3. They just worked the count well. Two of the villains if you're an Oriole fan.
This ball's crushed to left field. Kim on the run, won't be able to get it. And that's down in the corner. Here's Chisenhall to score, Santana to score. Being held at third is Gomes. So there's another double. This one drives in 2, and it's 4-0 Cleveland.
And Gomes saying, okay, there you go. 2 for now, what? 2 for 20. Well, it's about getting good pitches to hit. The first 3 hitters, whether, and this is just a changeup, it's the right pitch, but it stays up enough. So he's able to hook it because it's kind of thigh high out over the plate. If you're going well, maybe they line it at somebody, but he hooks it down in the corner, and you double the amount of runs that already were on the board to 4.
So Jackson wins that battle. He gets the big hit. And here's Francisco Lindor. Indians have batted around. Breaking ball upstairs, 1-0. Lindor has popped up to scope and flied out to left. Four runs on 5 hits, and all 4 runs driven in on doubles.
Yeah, and you got Lindor at 182 with runners in scoring position with an open base, and then Gibnus, who already an infield hit and a fly out, but he's 324. So very risky, even though you can't afford to give up any more runs. There's a good pitch, nice changeup.
A rough 4th inning here for Dylan Bundy. Hits it by him. 2-2 on Lindor. 6 of the 8 batters have reached and 4 have scored. Gomes at third. Austin Jackson is at second with 2 down. Sharply pulled foul behind Sandy Alomar. Well, Bundy a strike away from ending this long inning. Pull, that is foul. Mancini gloved it, but it was foul.
Yeah, I thought it'd be a double if he hit it that hard, but he's hugging the line, and when he catches it, you're hoping it's fair. A little breaking ball. He's going to hit it hard, and he really is played well at first.
His natural position.
Well, I mean, if you're not a good defender, you don't get to that ball.
Well, 7th pitch in this at bat, another 2-2 pitch to Lindor. Center field for Adam Jones, and Bundy will get out of it. So Adam puts it away, but the Indians bat around. They score 4. Mid-4th, 4-0 Cleveland. Orioles baseball on Masson is brought to you by Ocean City. Put your vacation days to good use in Ocean City. Book now at OCOcean.com. And by Chesapeake Employers Insurance, your workers' compensation insurance company. It's turned into a pretty nice night. After some thunderstorms and rain, no BP on the field today.
Well, weather-wise.
Right.
Scoreboard-wise, we're not. So far, it's not a. They're going to have to do what they did in Chicago, which is to mount some offense against a very tough right-hander.
So Kluber back to work. He's retired 7 in a row, and 9 of the 10 Orioles.
But look how efficient. 24 strikes and 7 balls. So you're hoping maybe at least you can get going. Long inning. Of course, a veteran pitcher, you come out and you use those 9 warm-up pitches. Really focus. Second time. Remember, this is when his numbers go up a little bit.
Machado takes ball 2. Manny hit a comebacker his first at bat. Let's go back and look at his home run on Saturday. You talk about a laser beam shot.
Well scorched.
Into the bullpen.
Well, Darren O'Day wasn't out there to catch it, and somebody, I think Brad Brock, almost got hurt. There's a strike at 3-0.
So the lowest launch angle home runs this season, Manny Machado, 15 degrees, tied with Judge, Sanchez, and Smoke for the lowest launch angle home run this year. Manny thought that was ball 4. Instead, the count goes full 3-2. Second hardest average exit velocity in baseball.
Yeah, but hitting about 80 points below his batting average with on balls in play, which is 303.
Bounce to Lindor at short. And Machado's retired 1 away. 8 in a row retired by Kluber.
Well, you think you're going to get a pitch down the middle, and he throws it right on the corner, maybe even off the corner, just a shade.
Adams singled his first at bat, the only base runner for the Orioles in this game. So he now has a 3-game hitting streak. His bat is really coming on. And how about yesterday? His first triple of the season.
Well, yeah, you got to know where to hit it. And right here, Dexter Fowler is going to kind of thought he could catch it, so he goes all the wall, hits the corner. And the Orioles actually get 2 triples in 1 inning. Well, there's the wipeout slider. And you can look foolish because the good ones you don't see the spin. It's just that simple.
Adams' bat really is coming on. His last 7 games, he's batting at .357 clip. 10 for 28 in those games. Very consistent. 1-2 on the high fastball. Now, Kluber did spend some time on the DL this year from May the 3rd till June the 1st. He had a lower back strain. His ERA prior to the DL was .506, and Adam into right field, but playing shallow as Chisenhall, and he's got it for the out. And 2 down. Well, for every Orioles walk, CareFirst Blue Cross Blue Shield will contribute $50 to support the American Diabetes Association. The Orioles have drawn 180 walks for a total of $9,000. CareFirst Blue Cross Blue Shield encourages each of us to take that first step towards a healthier and a more active lifestyle. Here's Mark Trumbo, struck out his first at bat. One of 3 Kluber strikeouts. Fouled off. Yeah, Kluber began the year going 3-2 in his first 6 starts before the disabled list, with an ERA very uncharacteristic of his ability, 5.06. But in 3 starts since returning, he's 2-0 and no decision, 2.37 ERA since returning. Well, Mickey Callaway has his ace back.
Well, the other thing he did, and You know, I was talking to Mickey. They backed him off a little bit because of the 6 games in the postseason. Went 4-1. Picked with 3 days rest, I think, on 3 of those. So the workload more than normal. He really pitched well against the Cubs, but stuff wasn't as crisp as it is here. Made great pitches, you know, really battled, but I think the fact that it's not that he couldn't do that, but when you're not used to it, a little more difficult to do. But he manned up and really pitched well for him. Gave him a chance to win a World Series.
And he gets Trumbo, another good slider. So a 3-up, 3-down inning, 3rd consecutive inning that Kluber's retired the side, 3-up, 3-down. Next group outing right here at Oriole Park with discounted ticket prices for groups as small as 15 guests and party facilities to fit up to 1,000 fans. Oriole Park can make your group outing an experience you'll never forget. Plus, group leaders can earn a variety of incentives. To learn more, Orioles.com/groups. Youngster at the ballpark, looking at the scoreboard, not liking what he sees. Here's Jason Kipnis. He led off the 4th inning with a fly ball to right, 1 out, nobody on, and before you knew it, the Indians would bat around and score 4 runs.
Yeah, he too slow start because of a shoulder injury. Only 2 games in spring training, so he didn't play his first game till late April.
Foul ball. Bundy for the year, he's done a very good job. We talk about, you know, the base runners per 9 innings, how many get on against you. And he's a tick under 11 per game. And then in that 4th inning, he allowed 6 base runners in 1 inning. That ball is crushed, and that ball's going to go. Maybe onto Utah Street. So Kipnis hits it out, and it's 5-0 Cleveland.
Yeah, not a lot of home runs last year, but the year before, 23 of them. So it's all again about if you're a hitter. I mean, first of all, it's a quick swing, and he's hoping 1 and 2 he gets a good pitch to hit, and he did. And that's really kind of been the story for Dillon. They try to come in, and I mean, it's down the middle. So if you don't hit your spots, he'd be the first guy to tell you that he's made a series of bad pitches tonight, and to their credit, I mean, this is how hot they are. Again, averaging 8 runs a game over their last, what, five games. So they're not missing them.
Ramirez to right field. That ball's crushed, but right at Seth Smith.
Yeah, and there are nights where you just don't quite have it, you know, your normal stuff, and if your arm's straight, and they had a tough game in Chicago because they worked the count and he had to hang in there. even though he only pitched 5 innings. And then all of a sudden you get a good hitting team and the mistakes get magnified, especially when Kluber's pitching as well as he is.
Encarnacion contributed in the rally in the 4th, an RBI double. He then scored. Encarnacion in his first season with the Indians, and you know the Blue Jays missed this bat. Foul. Castillo was hoping it would spin back the other way.
Well, any team that, you know, somebody hits close to 40 home runs every year are going to miss his bat. I mean, Smoke's having a terrific year up there, his best year ever at the major league level, but they had all kinds of injuries. Slow start by Batista, Donaldson out, same with Tulowitzki. But he was a big part. Steve Stone was talking about how when you take Chris Davis out of your lineup, whether he's hitting or not, you always know he's there. And Encarnacion, even when he's in one of these, you know, maybe cold streaks, you kind of always know where he is in the lineup or when he's on deck. And that's what good hitters bring to the table. And he is a bona fide home run guy.
A lot of movement on that pitch.
Yeah, well, yeah, he waves through it, and so a quality pitch. He wanted to get an out on it, and he didn't make contact.
Rip foul. This is his 6th 3-2 count in this game. And Encarnacion, another extended at bat by an Indian. This will be the 7th pitch.
And it's a little demoralizing when you throw your 3-2 fastball 92 in and he just rips it foul, and then you come back with a changeup and he takes it.
So a 1-out walk, and here comes Buck, and we'll get a pitching change as Vidal Nuno will come on here in the 5th. So a rough outing for Dylan Bundy, and he will depart on the short end of a 5-0 score. Bundy out, Nuno in the 5th.
Time that is not going to happen tonight as he runs into trouble, especially last inning, and then here in the 5th, Kipnis with a leadoff home run, so 100 pitches, and again not the normal command. Jiffy Lube pitching change is brought to you by Jiffy Lube. Jiffy Lube stores now do brake services. Stop it and let Jiffy Lube perform a free brake inspection today. So Vidal Nuno, 2nd straight day. Yesterday walk and a home run, so a very brief appearance. You know, a guy that's not overpowering. Lefties, as we keep mentioning, maybe the numbers a little bit higher, and a fly ball pitcher.
Ball 1 to Chisenhall with Encarnacion on at first. Chisenhall RBI double on a 1-2 pitch in the 4th inning. Good breaking ball there, 1-1. Nuno's 3rd game since rejoining the team, came back from AAA, and he's allowed runs in each of the other 2. As Jim mentioned, yesterday didn't get an out, a walk and a home run, and in 2 innings on Friday night he allowed a run on a home run. On the corner for a strike, 1-2.
Yeah, when he flies open, he just kind of dive bombs to the, really to the inside part of to a righty and whatever, and he just loses the command. And he's a command guy. He's got to make quality pitches. He has to have movement. Right there, he stayed closed long enough, and then Adam Jones is going to run it down.
2 down on the fly ball out, and back to first Encarnacion. Hey fans, remember, anytime the O's score 4 runs or more, you win free McDonald's Chicken McNuggets. Download McDonald's app today, available at Baltimore area McDonald's. Tough night for Dylan Bundy, just 4 1/3. 5 earned runs. The man on base has responsibility.
Yeah, there are nights where you're not like wild walking people. You're just wild in the zone, and that's what happened in the 4th when they got 4 doubles.
Left field, on the run is Kim. That ball's back, and that ball is gone. Carlos Santana hitting it out. The switch hitter pulls it to left, and it's 7-0 Cleveland.
Yeah, when you're not overpowering, you can't live in the middle of the plate. So 2 consecutive games. Yesterday it was Dexter Fowler who hit a home run, and then Carlos Santana, 105 miles per hour. He looks in that little circle, and again, look where the target is. The ball's up. Can't be there. And again, just the minute it gets up in this ballpark, sails out of here. Would have been a double in Cleveland because of the high wall, but it was still hit real hard.
Yan Gomes will take a ball.
And the amazing number for the Orioles, and this is really kind of reflective of the starters, and that is what, the 16th straight game they've given up 5 runs or more.
This ball's crushed to the gap. Back it goes, and that ball's off the wall and in play. And Kim will fire it back in. Gomes heading to second base with a double.
Well, we talked about going up to Minnesota and sweeping. The 2 teams with, at least to this point in the year, with the worst pitching in the American League, the Twins and the Orioles. And another fastball in the middle of the plate, and Gomes, you think that ball almost got out of here, but it short hops, kind of a topspin line drive. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 doubles and a home run. Get an idea of how well they're swinging the bat when they get good pitches to hit.
And they've hit 2 home runs in this inning. Kipnis led off. It looked like it landed on Utah Street. So Nuno, 3 appearances since coming back, at a home run allowed in each. Zimmer has struck out each at bat. Breaking ball hit towards the middle. Scope has it, off balance throw, not in time. Zimmer with his speed legs it out. There's an infield hit. Gomes ends up at third. Jonathan saved the run for the moment.
Yeah, he certainly did, and of course the speed factor. The #1 draft choice, he can really run, and that plays well defensively. And then of course right here, there's the run saver. No chance of throwing him out. Mancini heads up, comes off the bag just in case Gomes thinking about coming to home plate.
So Gomes at third, Zimmer at first, 2 down. And Austin Jackson up. He had a big hit in the 4th inning rally with a 2-run double. And it came with 2 men down. We've talked about the Orioles, how well they've done this year with runs being scored with 2 outs. The Indians doing a good job of that tonight.
Yeah, pretty good batting average, as you saw for Austin Jackson, but only the second hit with runners in scoring position.
This ball is trouble. And it's fair. That's in there for a base hit. Gomes will score. Heading to third is Zimmer. And on at second with a blue double is Austin Jackson. So that's an RBI double for Jackson, and he has a 3 RBI night.
Yeah, again, he gets it in on his fist. And you're right. Bermuda Triangle. I'm hoping it's going to go foul and just inside the foul line.
So Jackson has 2 doubles, 3 RBIs, and for a second consecutive inning, the Indians have batted around.
Yeah, you look, at had a pitching duel going into the 4th, nothing, and a couple of 4-run innings to this point.
4th straight hit allowed by Nuno after he retired Chisenhall on the fly ball to Jones. And Bundy dejected on the bench. You can see how confidently the Indians are at the plate by how they're taking pitches. That ball's hit deep to left field. Kim has a play on this one. And he's got it, and the inning finally ends. But a second consecutive 4-run inning chases Bundy. Mid-5th, 8-0 Cleveland.
Look at our Geico game highlights. 0-0 ball game. 1 out in the 4th. 2-strike fastball. Ramirez has been red hot. Doubles off the right field wall. Encarnacion equally as hot. Hits a double past Manny Machado. 1-0. And then Chisenhall on a 2-strike changeup up the gap. And then here's the big blow. 1 for 19. Austin Jackson drives in 2 more to make it 4-0 as the Indians will make it 4-0. Add another 4 runs, lead at 8-0. Those are your Geico highlights. 15 minutes to save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com to see how much you could save.
Strike 1 to Trey Mancini, leading off in the Oriole 5th. So you'd like to see the Orioles get something on the board here. Kluber's retired 10 in a row. The Orioles have had 1 base runner through the first 4 innings.
Almost handcuffed his catcher. That's how much movement he had on that fastball in 95. Hardest, at least most velocity and movement he's had all night.
Well, Mancini's got a 9-game hitting streak going. Batting .429 during the streak. 15 hits, including 3 home runs. Bouncer to second base. Right there's Kipnis.
Yeah, he does a nice job at tracking the slider, but it's such a quality pitch that it's hard to do anything but hit it weakly to the second baseman, and that's the kind of stuff that Kluber's exhibited tonight. Really, I mean, he hadn't got behind guys to get him back into the count. He's made quality pitches, plus stuff with a variety of pitches, even through some good changeups. And that's why he's Corey Kluber, and that's why he's won a Cy Young, and he was second last year.
Jonathan Scope falls behind 0-1. Both Jonathan and Mancini have had very good months of June run production wise. Jonathan has 6 home runs and 17 RBIs. Mancini has 5 home runs, 14 RBIs in the month. Jonathan 0 for 1 in this game, but this duo, they're really doing an outstanding job of getting runs in. Hit sharply, but right to Ramirez. 2 down. That's 12 in a row retired. Well, fans, we encourage you to text Masson's word of the day, which is safeguard, to 29292 for your chance to win a meet and greet with Chris Davis from Masson. That's safeguard to 29292. Brought to you by Chesapeake Employers Insurance, your workers' compensation specialist. Maybe she's doing that. Safeguard, S-A-F-E. Did you get the Masson site? At Masson. Okay, she's got it. Ball 1 to Wellington Castillo. 7 ground ball outs.
Well, you almost feel like that's a victory because of the stuff he, as you mentioned, 11 strikeouts per 9 innings. And you could see right there, I mean, he takes a little bit off the first one, so he subtracts it. 92, misses, comes back with another one on the corner. You're down by 8 runs, so you're trying to work the count a little bit, and he's not letting you. And he comes right back and gets back into a pitcher's count. And you have no idea of what he'll throw. Will he cut it? Will he throw a curveball? Will he throw a slider? Will he add a couple of miles per hour, get to 95 up and in?
And the 1-2, he got him, another slider. So another strikeout to end the inning. That is 5 strikeouts for Corey Kluber. So 3 up, 3 down, 13 in a row retired by Kluber. 8-0 Indians. And Jill Davis will host Crushes Homers for Hearts, benefiting the Pediatric Heart Program of the University of Maryland Children's Hospital. It'll take place on Thursday, July 13th, right here at Oriole Park. Now, attendees will watch a private Orioles team workout, then participate in a home run derby and more. To learn more, visit Orioles.com/homers for Hearts. That is the day before the second half begins following the All-Star break. Those fans hoping Nuno can put this game back in order a little bit. Back-to-back 4-run innings has Chase Bundy, and Nuno's allowed a couple of runs, including a 2-run homer. 1-1 on Kipnis.
He kind of shook his head on the first strike call, but Bill Miller, great guy to pitch with, you would think, because of the big strike zone. A little two-seamer trying to get him to roll over, and he has not swinging at that pitch.
Kipnis is leading off for a 3rd consecutive inning. Indians have batted around the last 2 innings, scoring 4 runs in each. He homered leading off in the 5th. He's 2 out of 3. An infield hit off Bundy's glove in the 1st. And a leadoff walk. And the first walk allowed by Nuno. This copyrighted telecast is presented by authority of the Orioles and may not be reproduced or retransmitted in any form. And the accounts and descriptions of this game may not be disseminated without the express written consent of the Orioles. Here is Ramirez, switch hitter, will bat right. He'll take a strike. Ramirez a double and a run scored in the 4-run rally in the 4th.
Well, about 60 more at bats hitting from the other side, but not a, I mean, 296 from this side, and then came in, and that average went up a little bit. 325 hitting left-handed off right-handed pitcher.
Slices it the other way. That's going to be a base hit, and that's going to head all the way to the wall. Kipnis is heading to 3rd. He'll be held there, and Ramirez at 2nd with his 2nd double of the night. And Nuno's having a hard time getting anybody out.
So 10 doubles now in 7 games. Wow.
Adam Jones all the way in from center field to cover up at 2nd base.
Probably asking him how he's doing this. The magic wand. As he takes a breaking ball and just inside, it's out down the right field line, and
Encarnacion walked intentionally, so he'll jog down to 1st. Gabriel Noah now getting loose. So the bases are loaded with nobody out, and here's Chisenhall. Nuno has faced 9 batters since coming on to relieve Bundy, and 7 have reached.
Well, he did get Chisenhall out, but he's no bargain. I mean, he doesn't get a lot of at bats. Only 21 at bats against lefties. He's 6 for 21. Came in at 300. And you're hoping. I mean, obviously, when you're down by 8, that's, you know, you set up the double play. You hope maybe you'll get a strikeout and then a double play. Doesn't get a whole lot easier with Carlos Santana, who only swings at strikes. Coming up.
This ball's down the line the other way and foul. The 1-2 on Chisenhall.
Yeah, you would never know it, and we showed you the graphic. The last 5 games, all of which they've won, they're averaging 8 runs a game. For the season, they're at 4.7 runs a game, and that, I mean, they're 8th in the American League in runs scored.
Well, you look at their season, and they have taken over first place in the AL Central by 2 games over Minnesota after sweeping the Twins. They're 8-2 against Minnesota and 28-29 against everybody else. So if you're going to dominate a team, make it a team in your division, especially one that you were fighting for first place with. There's a base hit up the middle for Chisenhall. 1 run will score as Kipnis comes in. Being held at 3rd is Ramirez.
Well, we showed you the initial numbers, and the higher batting average off of Vidal Nuno was lefty to lefty. And again, he gets a slider up a little bit, and what does Chisenhall do? Just hits it right back up the middle.
So an RBI hit and a rough night for Vidal Nuno. He'll leave. Inoa comes on in the 6th.
Came on against the Cardinals on Friday night and got roughed up. But he's really only pitched in 2 games, as you can see. Once against the White Sox back in early May. Actually got the win and pitched very well. Had 8 righties in the lineup. And you can see left-handed batters hitting .500 against him. You know, the Orioles acquired him in spring training from the Mets. Fastball slider pitcher with an occasional changeup.
Carlos Santana will be the first batter he faced. He's had a perfect night, and here's what he did facing Nuno in the 5th. 105.4 miles an hour, 21-degree launch angle, 385 hits. And swinging for the fences, and the baseball is jumping.
Well, it is. And, you know, they can deny all they want. I mean, what, 3-4 years ago they were talking, well, hey, we got to get more offense. Did the pitchers get that much poorer in 3 years? I think it's a little bit of a combination, maybe. But all in all, they say they've done tests. There's nobody that I've talked to that's been around the game that says the ball's not going farther. So throw grounders, strike people out, and that's always sometimes very hard to do. And again, for Santana, as we mentioned, I mean, many times, I mean, he's looking for a certain pitch, that's why he strikes out a lot, but he also walks a lot, and he also, 34 home runs last year, hits the ball out of the park.
Well, bases loaded, nobody out.
And we've seen him hit balls over the years, balls over his head, over the hedge in Cleveland. Both right-handed and left-handed. So he's a free swinger when he thinks he's going to get his pitch. And we'll see what he does here, 2-0, where he can pretty much look for anything he wants to.
Center field, Adam Jones back on it. Ball carries, but he has a play. And he will make the catch. Tagging from third is Ramirez. He will score. So another RBI for Carlos Santana. He has 3 RBIs, and it is 10-0 Cleveland. So Santana has 3 RBIs. Chisenhall has 3 RBIs. And Jackson, the number 9 batter, has 3 RBIs. Here's Yan Gomes, who doubled and scored in the 5th inning rally.
Well, you're in the 6th inning and only Francisco Lindor without a base hit.
Cleveland 10 runs on 12 hits. The Orioles have 1 hit. Adam Jones single in the first. That's it. Kluber's retired 13 consecutive Orioles. Knocked down 2-0.
Yeah, I think with a Noah, and if they, and I'm sure they've done their scouting reports, he actually has pretty good velocity. He can get the ball into the mid 90s. Against the White Sox, when he really pitched well, he had a great slider, but they eliminate that pitch, I would believe, unless he hangs it until you get the 2 strikes, because it's always been the pitch that's kind of a work in progress.
Ball 3.
It's hard to believe that with his stuff, pitching down at Norfolk, he's 1-5 with a 6.93 ERA. Buck was hard to believe that this was one of the choices they would bring up, because again, there's a dearth of pitching, and so it's command issues and the fact that he really they look for one pitch, and that's that fastball, and again, I mean, that's 96, 97. Pretty good movement, but if you could again spot it and then have a second or third pitch, certainly would make it a lot easier to pitch.
Nuno knocked around 2/3 of an inning. He's allowed 4 runs on 6 hits, and 2 men on base are his responsibility. This ball's trouble to right field. Long run for Seth Smith. He's not going to get there, and it is foul.
Yeah, it just appears in one of these nights already with 10 runs and 12 hits that every ball sliced down the left field line or right field is going to go fair. And didn't miss by much.
So Noah fortunate that ball sliced back foul. So the count goes full. Indians have won 5 in a row and 12 of 20. They're 12-8 in their last 20 games.
Yeah, good April. 14 wins, 10 losses. Struggled in May. 10 wins and 13 losses.
And he got him. Breaking ball in the inside corner.
Yeah, just the fact that it was spinning gets Yan Gomes to swing right over. It's not even close to being a strike, but the fact that it wasn't a fastball, what's that, about a foot inside? And he chases it. I'm sure that frustrates him. Here's your overhead shot, and you can see how far inside it's inside the batter's box line. And everybody in that dugout saying, well, somebody has to make it out. Otherwise, the game goes on forever.
Here's Bradley Zimmer, the rookie center fielder. He'll take ball 1. Zimmer has struck out twice and has an infield hit on a nice play by Scope. A lot of deep counts. There have been 4 walks. Bundy walked 2, 1 scored. Or excuse me, Bundy walked 3 and 2 scored. Slice foul, 2-1. And Nuno walked 2. 1 of those has scored. The other, Encarnacion, is on third base. Ball 3. Zimmer appears to have a pretty good idea of his strike zone.
Well, he made some changes. He got a little more upright. You know, he struck out a lot in the minor leagues, and you're trying to get to the big leagues. You know, maybe still, I mean, he's so big at 6'5" that it looks like, but they said he actually maybe got his feet a little bit closer together, open stance versus being square. Maybe have a chance to pick the ball up. Some guys open their stance actually have both eyes be able to actually see the ball. And there, Ty Van Berkeley, his hitting instructor, bench coach to his left, our right, Brad Mills.
3-2. Chisenhall will run from first, and it's bounced into the hole. A right field base hit. Here's Encarnacion to score. Over to third goes Chisenhall. So the onslaught continues.
Yeah, and again, it's probably the right pitch, unless you throw a 97-mile-per-hour fastball low and away. But the curveball stays down and in. And take a look right here. Now, big long hitter. So again, it stays up just enough, but it's nice hitting. Doesn't overswing. It's just a routine ground ball, but top spin. Scope can't get it. And they get their 11th run.
And here's Austin Jackson, the 8th batter this inning. Jackson has a 2-run double and another RBI double. So 3 RBIs in the number 9 spot. He has Chisenhall on at first and Zimmer on at first with 2 down. That ball is crushed to left. Back is Kim, and he makes the catch against the wall. Hyun-Soo Kim goes back to get it, and that ends the inning. So Kim goes back, he hauls it in, and the inning finally ends. Our Mazda do-ups as the Birds come to bat. Kim, Tejada, and Smith. Join us tomorrow. It's game 2 of the 4-game series with Josh Tomlin on the mound for Cleveland. Chris Tillman goes for the O's. Our coverage on MASN begins at 6:30 with O's Extra presented by Southwest, and then game coverage at 7 o'clock. We've got all the access you need right here on MASN.
Oh, there they are. Josh Tomlin 4-8 with a high ERA. Chris Tillman 1-5. So obviously both of these managers hope that they pitch more to their capabilities. Tillman pitched, much more about him. He lost in Chicago, but only gave up 1 run through the first 5, so took a step forward. So we'll see how he does against the Cleveland Indians tomorrow.
Eric Gonzalez comes in at second base. Terry Francona beginning to make changes. Kluber gets ahead of Kim quickly. 0-2. Center field, that chases Zimmer back, and he runs it down. So Kim hit it well, but Zimmer gets back for the out. Fans, MLB.tv every night on every device. Watch every out-of-market regular season game live, plus get a free subscription to At Bat Premium, the #1 app for live baseball. Blackout and other restrictions do apply. Visit MLB.tv for details. Showalter and John Russell talking it over.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's the first ball that's really been hit hard tonight. He finally got a ball in the middle of the plate. Can put a good swing on it.
He has been in command. 14 in a row retired.
Well, the long innings to get him 11 runs hasn't bothered him one bit. You can see it's almost like he looks down, finds a kind of a focal point, and then, I mean, a very compact windup. When you look at this, well, that's what a two-seam fastball, and that's the difference. They really, San Diego, they acquired Ryan Ludwig to give away Corey Kluber, who was pitching great in Double-A, but they were getting, Ludwig was a power guy. Of course, you bring him to a huge ballpark, and I don't think that they had any inkling that they were going to trade away a guy that would eventually win the Cy Young Award.
If the Padres can have back all the players they've traded away, they'd be a good team. Pulls a breaking ball to short. Right there is Lindor, and 2 quick outs.
Yeah, the only way you're going to beat a guy like Corey Kluber when he's on his game is where you have to be on yours. And for Dylan Bundy, that wasn't the case tonight.
Just the base hit by Adam Jones with 2 down in the first. The only base runner for the O's off Kluber. Smith has bounced out to short into the shift. He was on the second base side, and he's also struck out. 1 of 5 strikeouts for Kluber.
Yeah, the hardest hit ball was the ball that he smoked, but it was just foul. I mean, it really got on a low fastball that Corey Kluber pulled off the plate down and in.
Smith 7 hits his last 20 at bats. And there's a base hit the other way. And the fans reacting to a base runner. 15 in a row retired by Kluber before that single.
That's what Seth Smith does. Yeah, I mean, what a great focal point of him just hitting. What are you trying to hit? You're trying to hit the back of the ball, and the fact that he lets it travel and just stays inside it, and we have seen him countless times hit the ball to left field.
So for just the second time tonight, Kluber facing a batter from the stretch. Manny cues it to first. Santana's right there. He'll step on the bag, and that will end the inning. So a 2-out single, a man left. We are through 6. Cleveland with an 11-0 lead. And Gabriel Ynoa stays on. Some of the youngsters having fun here, trying to get on the scoreboard. Warm and muggy night at Camden Yards, and this one has been all Cleveland. Dylan Bundy, 6 earned runs in 4 1/3. Fidel Nuno, 5 earned runs in just 2/3 of an inning, and now it's Gabriel Ynoa. The Orioles have now allowed 5 or more runs in 16 consecutive games. The streak began on June the 3rd. And that is the longest streak in baseball history since the turn of the century, 1900.
It is.
The 1924 Phillies allowed 5 or more runs in 20 consecutive games. The 1901 Philadelphia Athletics allowed 5 or more in 17 straight. And now the Orioles this year, 2017, 16 consecutive games. The last game they did not allow at least 5 runs was June the 2nd, when the Red Sox scored only 2 and the Orioles won that game. This is bounced to first for Mancini. He'll take it himself and 1 away. So Lindor is retired for the first out. So Noah gets an out. Indians have 13 hits. Here's Eric Gonzalez batting for a first time. He took over for Kipnis.
Well, it's good to know. I mean, if you go back, you hand me the sheet. 1883, the Baltimore Orioles gave up 23 times. Something to shoot for. Or not, of course. That's a nice little list here. Yeah, the Rockies, yeah, you would think they'd be on there because of the altitude.
Gonzalez had been at AAA Columbus most of this year. He was called up on May 14th. Right field and hit well. Seth Smith on the run, and he makes the catch. Nicely done by Smith.
Yeah, not easy to focus when you're down by 11. Makes a nice running play. And then he tells the grounds crew.
That's how you get that done.
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, really makes a nice direct run to where he thinks it's going to come down, and the ball is actually slicing left to right. So able to reach over his right shoulder to haul it in.
Here's Ramirez. The Indians have gone 3 up, 3 down just once in this game. That was in the 3rd when Bundy retired Zimmer, Jackson, and Lindor. Strike on the corner. Ramirez doesn't like the call.
Well, it's a great time, and you know you're down by 11, but Gabriel Ynoa, it's a good time. You know, you come out of the minor leagues, AAA. It's a different ball. Get a feel for your pitches. You're going to get a chance to pitch. So, you know, just it's almost like you can experiment a little bit. You know, like you do in spring training, where you can throw maybe a few more changeups, but use your secondary pitches, whatever they may be. There's a changeup.
Right field. Smith back on this one, and it's over his head and bounces against the wall. So Ramirez heads to second base. He's thinking 3, and Scope will not even throw.
Yeah, wise decision there. Boy, what a streak Jose Ramirez is on. 2 doubles and a triple. So 7 games, 10 doubles, 3 home runs, and now a triple. And Seth Smith almost runs it down, and here comes Adam Jones. Jonathan Scope, a wise decision because easy with the rain early. We saw this in Chicago in the Bundy game where he threw a ball away. So we learned something. It's good to see.
Strike one to Encarnacion. RBI double and a run scored in the fourth. He has since walked twice and scored each time. So he scored 3 runs tonight. Bouncer to third, but foul. Well, the Orioles team ERA coming in 4.97, 14th. Just a tick better than Minnesota. And the starters have the highest ERA of any starting staff in the American League at 5.46. A tough year on the mound. Swung at a ball and popped it up. Mancini over near the stands and reaches in and makes the catch. And that will end the inning. 7th inning stretch in Baltimore. The Indians with the lead. Our 7th inning stretch and the Hyundai Better Than Ever sales event with the best total savings on select models in Hyundai's history. It's going on now at your Hyundai dealer. Nice shot of the convention center downtown. 11-0 Cleveland on 14 hits. The Orioles have had 2 base runners off Kluber. Adam Jones, who leads off here in the 7th, a single in the 1st. And Seth Smith with a single in the 6th. And each base hit came with 2 men down, and Kluber then retired the next batter. So Adam now with a 3-game hitting streak. And he is 11 for 30 in his last 8 games. That's a 367 clip for Jones. So his bat looks like it's on the rise. Good slider there, 1 and 2.
Well, they're all pretty good. He hadn't hung one yet. You know, I was watching the highlights of his last game, which was 2 runs against the Dodgers. Got a no decision. You know, I threw on to Justin Turner that stayed up a little bit, but not tonight. Not a lot of hittable pitches. And he's done it so efficiently. But again, great command. And you don't know what you're going to get. He's always around the plate. Yeah, it looks to me that the pitch that, I mean, the slider is about as good as it gets, but he's got a little cutter that he throws for strike 1. That's how he started Adam Jones over at 88. And then if he wants to make it move a little more, he'll throw a two-seam fastball between tonight, 93 and 95. So he's got everything working. And up the ladder and move it around. And that's what good pitchers do. Yeah, you know, you work on it when you're doing your sides. You know, it starts in spring training when you're getting your conditioning. Used to throw batting practice, and you'd ask guys, okay, you know, where do you want it? Do you want it in? Do you want it away? You want a couple of curveballs? Some hitters did, some didn't.
You know, it's interesting you bring that up. I was talking with Steve Stone in Chicago about that there was a time when starters in between starts would do their side sessions during BP, so they faced hitters. And when I worked at CBS Radio, I did some games with Al Downing. And Al Downing, of course, pitched with the Yankees in the 60s and then eventually went to the Dodgers. But he said Mickey Mantle used to hate it because the pitchers would be on the mound as Adam strikes out, and they're working on things. They're working on breaking balls, maybe change-ups, and the hitters just want fastballs in there so they can swing.
Yeah, and here's another one of those great sliders. And, you know, again, the good slider looks like a fastball, slides. And if you're Corey Kluber, you get the tilt where it slides from strike to ball. And tonight he's thrown them at different speeds. You think they're there and they end up somewhere else. And there's that, there's a, you know, like a little cutter. And Mark Trumbo, he's just trying to make contact. I mean, any kind of contact. The only one he did, he ran a fastball in on his fist, and he almost hit it behind him.
This ball's cued towards first.
Well, how many times do you see 3 or 4 balls? Manny's hit 2 like that. And that just gives you an idea of how tough he is to hit. Probably hides the ball well, can't pick it up. Yeah, I think if you're going to throw batting practice, and you know, part of your conditioning in spring training, if you're going to throw breaking balls, you got to let the hitters know. I mean, Brady Anderson used to always, even when I retired, he said, I'd love to have you come out and throw me some, you know, overhand curveballs, because a lot of guys don't have it, yet you may face a guy that does. Yeah, but you're right about most hitters. And then my first pitching coach, Harry the Cat Burkeen, he liked to see if you could break bats. But I just want, you know, when you're 19 trying to make a ball club, you want the hitters to be your friends.
So you were polite. You
yeah.
said, where would you like it?
Well, I threw great BP because I was trying. I looked at it. I used to have a contest with Mo Drabowski, you know, struck out 11 Dodgers in 6 2/3 innings and kind of set the tone in the '66 World Series. And we would have a contest in 15 minutes because we built up to throwing batting practice for 15 minutes. How many pitches we could throw, and I think Drabble once got to about 220.
Whoa.
I could never get more than maybe a 205. Chris Mosley, also the same guy that says, you know, there's only so many pitches in your arm. And I said, no, there isn't. Because I figured if you worked hard enough and whatever. And he said, no, I know for a fact. Because one night in Boston, I wound up and threw my best fastball, and I just kind of watched it go up to home plate because I had lost that much arm speed. So various different ways, you know, getting yourself ready to pitch. I don't know what Kluber's doing, but it's working.
It's ahead of Mancini 1-2. Trey as hot as they are right now, and he's 0 for 2. Just does get a piece. There have been only 3 balls hit to the outfield in this game. Jones lined out to right in the 4th. Tejada flied out to center in the 3rd, and Kim flied out to center in the 6th.
And Scott Coolbaugh on the left, the hitting instructor. It's one of those nights where, you know, again, obviously you're down by 11 runs, but you tip your hat to Corey Kluber. He's been that good.
And Mancini goes down on strikes, and that'll end the inning. So another 3-up, 3-down inning. He's retired the side in order 5 of the 7 innings. baseball break brought to you by T-Mobile. Well, the Reds leading Tampa Bay 6-3 in the 8th. Scooter Gennett 2 for 3, including a 2-run home run. He is 9. He had 4 in one game. And Winker 1 out of 4 with a 2-run single. Blue Jays are leading in Texas 5-3 in the 4th. Justin Smoke 2 for 2 with his 20th home run. And Marco Estrada 3 2/3 so far, 3 runs on 6 hits. The Red Sox and the Royals tied 2-2 in Kansas City in the 6th. Hosmer has a 2-run home run. Jackie Bradley has a 2-run home run. Well, several defensive changes. Joey Rickard comes on for Adam Jones. He's in center field. David Washington takes over for Seth Smith in right field. Ruben Tejada moves from shortstop to third base. And Paul Giannis, just recalled today, is now at shortstop. And here's Caleb Joseph in to do the catching. So Smith is out. Machado's out. Jones is out. Castillo is out. And that empties the bench. All 4 bench players now in the game. And Inoa stays on. He's trying to get through to the 9th inning to save the rest of the bullpen for tomorrow.
Well, he's done a nice job of that, actually. He's mixed his pitches up well. You know, he's got a good arm. Obviously could throw more strikes than balls, which he has, but I mean, but again, you're seeing a kid that he just needs to pitch to see if he can get better. And so he can get it in. I mean, that's where Caleb Joseph wanted the glove, but he gets it in too hard and he gets even more of a hitter's count. Not that Chisenhall needs that. Had some nice at bats tonight.
Pop foul. That'll be back out of play.
Yeah, the big I mean, it's hard to go back and look at an 11-0 game, but with Dylan Bundy, who was so resourceful when he got behind the other day, but the big pitch was the change up to Austin Jackson with the bases loaded. Chance to get out of that inning with only 2 runs, and he got it up in the strike zone and hit it right down the left field line.
Strike 3 called on the inside corner.
Yeah, nice movement. 11-0 game. Ball might have been a little bit in, but the strike zone has a tendency to maybe get a little bit bigger. I would think it would be called. Yeah, it's off the plate a little bit. Bill Miller saying, when's enough? Well, maybe not saying that, but got the right arm up.
Carlos Santana, perfect night. He has walked twice. He has a 2-run home run, and he has a sac fly. So a 3 RBI game for Carlos. Good changeup. 1-1.
Yeah, you're seeing the ability, maybe not consistently, to having a good breaking ball, having as good a changeup as you can throw, having movement on your fastball. And again, I just don't understand 1 in 5 at AAA with an ERA close to 7 runs a game. It's mind-boggling.
Well, it has been a challenge. There's no doubt about it. It's been a tough go for the starting staff. There's been so much inconsistency, and with the injuries in the bullpen and players coming and going because they haven't been able to get the job done. And as Buck Showalter has said so many times, I want somebody to stay here. Just pitch well and you'll stay. You mentioned that just the other day again.
Well, and one of the problems, though, is when your starters, not only when they don't pitch well, they don't pitch long enough. You have to go to your bullpen, and then you have to use long men. And then if they have options, you need to get fresh arms. So it has been tough. But I think they knew going in that everybody had to pitch as well as they did last year, or maybe better. Yeah, look at this stroke.
Santana the opposite way. That ball was up in the zone, and Rickard will fire it back in.
Yeah, you think, it's the right pitch. I'll just throw him a breaking ball. But if you don't throw it and make it a quality pitch, I mean, here it is. So it stays up and it becomes hittable because you get the foot down, so it gives you all kinds of time as it just kind of hangs out over the plate and it just pokes it into left and will come out of the game.
Daniel Robertson will come off the bench and pinch run.
No, nobody up in their bullpen because of the pitch count. So if you're Terry Francona, you've got a lot of options. You know, if Kluber wants to, he already pitched a 3-hit shutout. If he wants to attempt to pitch one tonight, you have an option.
Kim was deep. This ball is trouble. It's going to fall in there. Fourth hit allowed by Inoa.
And if you're a fan here tonight, you're rooting for the Orioles, you're speechless. I mean, all the balls, soft, hard, hit. Jan Jones says thank you very much. Fought it off already with a double and a walk.
Here's Bradley Zimmer, the rookie center fielder. A 2 for 4 night, including an RBI single. So Noah's at 48 pitches. He's been stretched out. Another borderline call, 1-1. Caleb and Inoa having trouble coming together on the side, so Caleb jogs out.
Yeah, Zimmer, who stands at the plate, you know, they swept the Twins. He made a throw from center field yesterday at 101.5 miles per hour. And he threw out Max Kepler early in the ball game, a game that they would win 5-2. And the ball actually bounced to the outfield side of home plate, and he still threw the runner out by about 5 feet. 101 miles per hour.
One and two. Well, tomorrow night, Chris Tillman will take his turn. He'll go against Josh Tomlin. Then Wednesday night, it's Kevin Gausman against Carlos Carrasco. And on Thursday, Wade Miley goes against Mike Clevenger.
We really like them. The Indians are playing well. I mean, I don't know if anybody be as good as Kluber going to be. Tomlin, you know, maybe not a power pitcher like Corey Kluber. He changes speeds well.
This one's lined to left. And Kim has it for the second out. That was the 179th pitch thrown by Oriole pitching here tonight. So 2 down. The runners hold at second and first. And here's Austin Jackson. Jackson in the number 9 spot has a couple of doubles. One drove in 2, another drove in 1. And the kind of night it's been for the Indians, the RBI double in the 5th was a pop-up down the right field line that stayed fair by maybe 2 inches. 11 runs on 16 hits for the Indians.
Well, there's been an assortment, but they hit some balls really hard early. And again, his double with 2 outs in the 4th. I mean, at that point, the big hit, because it doubled the score. You know, if you get out of that, you know, you give up what, 3 doubles and a walk, and you get out of only 2 runs. And Dylan Bundy had done such a good job of that all year long. But again, he took a changeup, was up just a little bit, and hooked it down the line for two more runs to make it 4-0.
Bundy went 4 1/3, 6 runs on 6 hits. Nuno 2/3, 5 runs on 6 hits, and Inoa has been on since the 6th. So this is his 3rd inning of work. Up to 55 pitches. Richard Blyer beginning to get loose.
Outside, he walked him. Now to load the bases. That's the first walk allowed by Inoa. The 6th walk, and here comes Roger McDowell.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to make a pitching change. That's not usually what happens. And of course, Lindor can turn around, hit either way he wants. And with the lefty Blyer throwing, probably asking him. And again, when the ball starts running like that, usually your front shoulder is flying open. And just try to get him to focus a little bit more. Get another out here in the 8th. Hey, your point well taken, and they're just trying to get through this game. And again, of course, if you did have to use somebody the 9th inning, it's only going to be for 1 inning.
.184 pitches by the 3 Oriole pitchers. 81 for Kluber to get through 7 scoreless innings.
Well, if you're going to be a good team, and everybody in baseball knows this, you better have a #1 starter, and that is exactly what Corey Kluber is.
Whoa, look out, Sandy Alomar.
That's why they wear the helmet. And you know, in the minor leagues, we used to coach first base without one, and you don't realize how close you are when somebody hits one like that. And again, the ball hooks. So right there, he just goes backwards, a little limbo dance to get out of harm's way.
Laugh about it now. He's hearing about it from Wayne Kirby. Now 1-2 on Lindor. Lindor is 0 for 5. The only Cleveland player without a base hit. And he grounds this to Mancini. Trey will flip to Inoa covering up, and that will end the inning. So the Indians threaten they do not score and strand the bases loaded. Mid-8th, 11-0 Cleveland. Alomar, a sigh of relief. Down 11-0, and Sandy Alomar had this whiz by him a moment ago. Lindor 110.3 miles per hour. And yeah, he could smile about it because it missed him. So a few defensive changes. Lonnie Chisenhall comes in from right field to play first base. Daniel Robertson, a pinch ran for Santana, stays in the game in right field. So Kluber, 5 3-up, 3-down innings. He's allowed 2 singles. The Orioles' lone base runners of the night. And a swing and a miss on 1. Scope has twice bounced out to third base. Well, it looked as if the Orioles had found their stroke with back-to-back wins, and now tonight they run into Corey Kluber, who's on his game. Another one to third base. And out at first. One away. Jim Coons AL League leaders brought to you by Coons. When you're talking cars, you're talking Coons at Coons.com. Well, complete game leaders in the American League. The Indians have 2. This number has dwindled in recent years with the closer's importance increasing, but the 2 for the Indians, Kluber has 1 and Tomlin has 1. And Kluber's was a shutout. Here's David Washington. He's in Castillo's spot.
Yeah, there was an article in Sports Illustrated talking about Kluber since he did come off that back injury, how he's, not that he doesn't use his fastball, but he's used his curveball and his breaking ball more. So the sinker usage has gone down like 20%, and the curveball usage, you know, we got a number that he throws it what, like 39% of the time when he gets 2 strikes, whether it's a curveball or the slider. And then again, his stuff, I mean, it's just, I don't know if he can be a whole lot better than he's been tonight. And I mean, here we're in the 8th inning. He hadn't thrown a lot of pitches. He's big, he's strong, and he just goes to 94. And how you do that is just speed up your arm. You know, windup doesn't change. Don't throw any. I mean, you can use your legs, obviously, because that allows you to get down the pitching slope, but stay compact.
Well, his season high in pitches was 110. That was back April 21st before the DL, and that was the game in which he pitched the shutout against the White Sox. 2-2 on Washington, 1 out, nobody on. And he struck him out. So David Washington, since coming up from AAA, 0 for 6 with 5 strikeouts.
Yeah, another slider right here, and you think it's going to be on the plate, and it's not. It makes you look really silly because it's that good. I mean, again, it's just, I mean, really, it kind of break your hands and your arms over your knee, and then they always it's the spin rate on your breaking ball, and I imagine it's spinning pretty rate. The rate is up there.
Ball 1 to Hyun-Soo Kim.
What about a month ago they had the article about what Lance McCullers, who's now on the DL with a bad back for Houston. His spin rate was what, 2850. Well, his is over 2700, and that's up there.
Kim with a base hit.
Yeah, there's that little cut fastball, and well, Kim, I mean, that's what he does. I mean, he's hit 2 balls hard tonight, and there haven't been a whole lot of balls hit hard. He lined out to center field, but right at Bradley Zimmer, and this time that cutter, he stays up and he gets to it very quickly. And again, if you know where the bat head is, you can see how quickly he gets that bat head to the ball. Not going to make a whole lot of difference in an 11-0 game, but it's a quality at bat.
So 3 hits allowed by Kluber, and all 3 hits have come after the first 2 were retired. Jones in the 1st, Smith in the 6th, and Kim here in the 8th. Here's the number 9 batter, Ruben Tejada. And right to the shortstop, Lindor. He'll flip to second to Gonzalez for the force on Kim, and that will end the inning. So the Orioles get a hit, 1 left. We head to the 9th. The Indians in front. Orioles baseball on Masson is brought to you by Southwest. Yes to low fares with nothing to hide. That's transparency. Downtown Baltimore on this Monday night. It rained earlier, but the rain stayed away. And this one has been all Cleveland. 11 runs on 16 base hits. And Richard Blyer comes on to work the ninth.
Yeah, pitched on Saturday. One batter walked him, and then Orioles, even though it ended up to be a 15-7 win, and a little dicey. So they had to bring in Michael Gibbons, who got him out of the bases loaded jam. So, strike thrower on normal occasions. That's what he did at Rochester, or Norfolk. I'm dating myself. Rochester, the former AAA club. I think it's Minnesota's now.
Yep, Minnesota. And the Nats are up there in Syracuse.
The Yankees are in Scranton.
Right. And the Phillies AAA teams in Lehigh Valley, I think, of Pennsylvania. So quite a few.
The Iron
very
Pigs.
Close.
And then speaking of minor league baseball, actually independent league, go down to Canton to the Merritt, do a little workout, stop for Starbucks, and there is Brian Ebel, the assistant trainer, sitting with former Oriole pitcher Brad Lucas.
Wow.
Yep. And I said, so Brad, how's your shin? Because if you remember, really his career ended when Billy Butler, nice little pitch right here on a slider. It was afternoon game here at Camden Yards, and Brad was really pitching well for the Orioles, but he hit him in the shin, and and then end up hurting his shoulder. So he's actually pitching for the Lancaster Barnstormers at Tommy John surgery. Went back to school, so trying to get back in pitching. So good luck with that.
Yeah, he's really one of the nicest people that has come through here.
Yeah, he was with with his son, and so I stayed there for 10 or 15 minutes, so it was good to see him. In fact, the hitting instructor up there is former Oriole Josh Bell. So again, playing up in Lancaster. That's where Rich Hill made his comeback.
Cini gloves, and he'll go to the bag.
Yeah, he can pick it over there. Nobody ever told me he was a good fielder. I only heard about how good a hitter he was coming up through the minor leagues, but very nice play.
And again, in a blowout game like this, you love to see the effort late in the game.
Well, it's not the effort, I think it's just the focus. It's easy to kind of have your mind wandering. You're already thinking about tomorrow night, because obviously you want to play better as a team and as an individual. But that was Ramirez trying for another extra base hit. And again, great angle. Because that gets by him, it's probably going to be 2. So Ramirez already with 2 doubles and a triple.
Well, Mancini doing a fine job defensively, and of course he's hitting the ball. Encarnacion RBI double in the 4-run rally in the 4th. Gets ahead 3-0. Blyer, by the way, has put together a string. He's got 11 consecutive scoreless appearances to his credit. Jim mentioned his appearance here on Saturday, faced 1 batter allowed a walk, but that batter did not score, so the streak continued to 11. So he's been a valuable addition to the bullpen. Comes back, get full, 3-2.
Yeah, Edwin's think he's going to get a fastball, and he just kind of gets a kind of a 3-1 slider. He kind of backs up a little bit. He swings right through it, and he pitches quickly. And there's a better one, down and in.
I think the other thing, and you've mentioned this a few times with Blyer, he's really big. And he gives the appearance that he's a hard thrower, and he's not. So the hitter's expecting the ball to get there, and it just doesn't get there.
Well, and also, again, a little closed stance, so deception and hiding the ball, important. See, there's a closed. Encarnacion is trying to hit 17th home run right there.
Look out. So another 3-2 pitch to Encarnacion. This one fouled back. Encarnacion about to see a 10th pitch in this at bat. It was very quickly 3-0, and Blyer got back in it at 3-2, and now the foul ball's prolonging the at bat. And he pops him up. Mancini on the right side. And he missed it. Or Scope was in the shift. That would have been his ball all the way, but he was on the other side of the infield.
Yeah, it's not a lot of wind, but it almost like he either didn't see it. So again, he's been so good on grounders. Right there. I mean, look, he has to make that last move and can't get it. Yeah, Kluber's already to come out, and he goes, well, it's been that kind of night. I think I'll get dressed again. Yeah, when you got 11-0 lead and you're on a roll like Corey Kluber, you don't need any more offense. You just want to get back out there, get 3 outs, and get the game over with.
Nice play by Blyer. Bobbles the ball, and everybody's safe.
Well, when you're 6'5", it's a long way, from the ground to get on your feet. And again, we had early rain, even though the tarp was on. I mean, makes a nice play to get it, and then just can't get a handle on it. He's going to pounce on it right here, and then can't make the transfer.
Well, he probably had a little more time than he felt, and in his haste, he bobbled it.
Yeah, I think once you fall to the ground, you think you got to get up, and then not only you have to do that, I think he was going to throw that ball from his knees.
Robertson batting for a first time, rips it foul. He pinch ran for Carlos Santana, who had a perfect night. 2 walks, a single, a 2-run home run, and a sac fly.
Well, hamstring cost him about a month early on, but he's hit in 12 out of 19, so nice utility player for him. And that's going to advance the runners. Breaking ball in the dirt.
So the wild pitch moves the runners along.
And that ball bounced way out by home plate. A little bit easier to block if it at least hits the dirt and skids.
And that's bounced to Giannis, who bobbles the ball, picks it up, throws late, and a run scores.
Wow, what a sloppy inning this is. So you got the drop pop up. You have a guy that's a very gifted defensive shortstop. And it's not a difficult play, but he doesn't get the right hop. And then the late throw. There you can see the short hop. Usually shortstops, especially ones like Paul Giannis, they can pick their hops, not always, but sometimes, and just can't handle it. So that will be an error. 12-0.
And it was 2 outs and nobody on in the pop-up. But if Mancini catches, it's a 3-up, 3-down inning. And the Indians 12 runs now on 17 hits, and the Orioles have committed 2 errors in both this inning. And he gets to first, and that ends the inning. But an unearned run adds to the Indians' lead. We hit to the bottom of the ninth. Kluber going back, looking for a shutout. Trailing 12-0. An unearned run in the top of the ninth, adding to the Indians' run total. And there is Corey Kluber, who's looking for his second shutout of the year, and he has been very pitch efficient, as you see. 93 pitches to get through 8 scoreless innings.
Yeah, total command tonight, and whatever he wants to do, he can do. He's been that good. I don't think he's even come close to walking anybody.
Joey Rickard, his first at bat, he took over for Adam Jones in center field. He's in Seth Smith's spot. Joey 0 for his last 8. Caleb Joseph on deck, and then Paul Janisch. Armstrong getting loose just in case. Indians going with an 8-man bullpen. 2 lefties and 6 righties.
Yeah, I think they called that second pitch a strike on the check swing, and because otherwise you haven't seen too many 2-1 counts from Corey Kluber tonight.
Kluber has struck out 8, and as Jim mentioned, he has not walked a batter, and he has allowed 3 hits, all singles, and all 3 hits came with 2 down in an inning. Adam Jones has a hit, Seth Smith has a hit, Hyun-Soo Kim has a hit. And Rickard down on strikes. There's that slider again,
yep.
1 away.
Yeah, you know, we thought that Carlos Martinez's slider on Friday night was good, and it was, and he hit 100. Not that he pitched there all night long, but again, the good slider, you think it's going to be a strike, and it ends up not. So strike the ball, perfectly thrown.
There's Caleb Joseph, his first at bat. He'll take a strike. Caleb has a 3-game hitting streak going, 4 for 7, couple of RBIs in those 3 games. And he's having a real good month, 310 in the month of June. A couple of ribbies. Down on the count quickly, 0-2. Paul Janisch on deck. He'll bat after Joseph, and it's outside, a ball and 2 strikes.
Yeah, the amazing thing of the modern era, that, you know, he's been that efficient, and yet you think that 101 pitches is a lot a lot of pitches, but it really isn't. It's just that they put this number on it. And again, that's 102. And there's another strikeout. So you get easily, if you just start counting pitches. And the thing about him, I mean, it's not the only game he's efficient. He averages 15.2 pitches per inning, which is, for a power pitcher, amazingly low. And if you multiply that by 9, what do you get? About a 135. Yet he has not even come close to throwing that tonight or in any other of his games.
10 strikeouts. He has 10 strikeouts now in back-to-back starts. And for a 4th time this year, that's his season high. Paul Janish's first at-bat since May 28th in Houston, when he started the finale of that 3-game weekend series. He was designated for assignment on June the 6th, cleared waivers, and rejoined AAA Norfolk. A little bit low.
No, this is one of those games where, you know, it's not like you lost a 1-run ball game. You just got shellacked by a really good hitting team, and also by a guy that's, I don't know if he can be a whole lot better. And it's a lot easier to take this kind of loss, even though you don't like to lose games, and just say, okay, I don't know if Tomlin can be this good tomorrow. I would imagine that the Orioles are thinking that won't be the case. So you move on. You hope Tillman gets back on track, and he'll have to do that against a very good hitting team. But this was a game that after the 4th inning, you didn't have a chance to win.
And fouled off the other way on a check swing. And Cini hoping to get a chance, but he's behind Trumbo, who's on deck.
Yeah, dude.
And he struck him out to complete the shutout. Strikes out the side in the 9th for an exclamation point. So Corey Kluber goes the distance. He pitches a 3-hit shutout, and the Indians grab the opener of this 4-game series. So his 5th career shutout.
Yeah, and you just don't see it a whole lot. To give an idea, I mean, 2nd in the Cy Young last year, won it 2 years before that. And again, this is the 2nd shutout of this year. Again, both of them very efficient. And anytime you throw 108 pitches, 80 strikes, you've gotten the job done. So very rarely does he ever show emotion, but he certainly, now that he has pitched a shutout, you see a little bit of a smile. It was that type of night for him.
Well, we hope you can join us tomorrow. Game 2 of the 4-game series with Josh Tomlin on the mound against Chris Tillman. Our coverage begins on MASN at 6:30 with O's Extra presented by Southwest, and then game coverage at 7 o'clock. And now for Jim Palmer and our entire hardworking crew, Jim Hunter saying so long from Camden Yards. Once again, our final score, Cleveland 12, the Orioles nothing. Tonight's telecast, the MASN presentation, Tom and Rick, O's Extra comes your way right now.